There's no guarantee that in 5 years, Google won't be the only search engine, the only reasonable alternative. There's no reason to think that in 5 years, Google won't essentially be the equivalent of the web itself.
Google keeps every search query, what you type into the box, forever.
You know, if I'm a Google user, you have years worth of my search terms, you guys really know everything about me.
Well, we don't know everything about you.
Imagine you're a tourist, you arrive at this place and you would like to know more about it. All you will have to do is take a shot of the sign and then we send the information up to the server. And you see we recognize this as the Santa Monica Pier.
What you see is a culture where people feel that they can build things. They can actually accomplish what they want. And ultimately people stay in companies because they can achieve something.
High five, Google!
It's phenomenal. If you're 24 and single, it's kind of like programmer nirvana.
This company has made you fabulously wealthy, hasn't it?
We've been, as a company, obviously more lucky than any company deserves to be.
Most successful company in the history of the world. I think that's true.
I'm Maria Bartiromo. 6 simple letters on a plain white page. That's the face of the most powerful technology company in the world. Revered, envied, and sometimes scorned. Google's co-founders, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, started the company as grad students in 1998. It has made them astoundingly rich. Today, they stand atop an empire cast in their own image. Audacious, ambitious, and often controversial. It is a company like no other, thriving on long hours, too much coffee, and something quite elusive: genius.
It's Wednesday morning at Google's world headquarters in Mountain View, California. And here, home to some of the brightest minds in the world, engineers in a remote office wing are talking about marbles.
See the marble right in the top of the Ferris wheel there?
Yeah.
Toy marbles.
Our first iteration of the track, we had it all suspended with fishing line. We found it to be really inconsistent, so we installed like this pole system.
It is a remarkable piece of work. It's also classic Google. Quirky, whimsical, and very inspired. The kind of spontaneous creativity that CEO Eric Schmidt says is an essential part of the Google culture.
I tend to think of Google as an extension of graduate school. Similar kinds of people, similar kind of crazy behavior, but people who are incredibly smart and incredibly motivated and have a sense of change, a sense of optimism.
Well, you feel that energy when you're walking around.
And we work hard to maintain that. What you see is a culture where people feel that they can build things, that they can actually accomplish what they want. And ultimately people stay in companies because they can achieve something.
What you're building that is a dictionary that says this is a translation
of that Chinese term.
Something over there.
Yeah.
Google's success comes from attracting the best possible employees and then making work irresistible. And that means making it fun. Lots of fun.
High five, Google.
If you're restless, there are gyms. If you're stressed, there are massages. And then there's the food.
How we doing, Chef? Great, how are you? Good, good. Busy, busy. We have a team of 7 executive chefs here in Mountain View, and we have about 18 cafes in Hull that we oversee.
Maybe you'd like Indian cuisine today, or sushi. No problem. Google has it all. And best of all, everything's free. For employees, that is. It costs Google a fortune.
Those are expensive benefits. What's the business justification?
It's a simple argument. We want them working all the time. And so if they're off doing other things, we don't have their attention.
Keeping your attention on work means keeping it off the mundane stuff. Like your laundry. Google will do that. Or your commute. Google will drive you. And don't ever sweat your wardrobe. Google is strictly casual. You don't even have to shave if the Queen of England herself comes by.
If we do a search for Windsor Castle...
And she did.
It's phenomenal. If you're 24 and single, it's kind of like programmer nirvana.
Engineer Noel Gorlick runs Google's Mars, Moon, and Sky programs. He spent 19 years working with NASA. But however impressive his resume, at Google, he's just one more bright mind in a sea of 20,000.
I did my master's in computer science. I used 12 textbooks during my courses. 10 of the guys that wrote those textbooks work here.
This is the culture created in 1998 by a pair of Stanford University grad students, Sergey Brin and Larry Page.
When we were trying to name Google, we actually went through thousands of names, and we had settled on Google because it sounds fun. It also means a very large number. It means 1 followed by 100 zeros.
What started out as a research project has become this, a high-tech juggernaut and one of the most successful companies on the planet, with an array of cutting-edge products. There's Google Voice, Google Chrome, Google Images, and Google News. There's Google Book Search and Google Maps. And then there's YouTube, which Google owns, home to 20 hours of new video uploaded every minute. But all that pales in comparison to Google's crown jewel and its greatest creation, the Google Internet Search Engine. If you used it to find a Google expert, you might come up with this man, author John Battelle.
You've studied the company for so long. Give us a sense of what Google is, how successful a phenomenon it is. How would you characterize it?
Most successful company in the history of the world. I think that's fair.
The most successful company in the world.
I think that's true. I think it's inarguable. Now, if you look at past histories, Microsoft, I think, rivals Google for a period of time, right? From the late 80s through the mid-90s, its growth was quite similar. I do not believe it had the same profit curve, though. The profits that Google has managed to create are extraordinary.
In 2008, Google earned more than $4 billion in profits, with more than 95% of that coming from advertising, tied to its search engine. What makes it so good? In simple terms, a basic search engine crawls the internet, bouncing from link to link, indexing as many web pages as it can. When you do a search, it stacks your results based on the number of times your search term appears in each site. Google's masterstroke was to rank every website's importance by counting the number of other websites linking back to it. Google figured the more links to a site, the more important it must be, and the higher it should show up in your search results. They called this approach PageRank, after Larry Page, and it worked brilliantly.
I'm sure you remember, as do I, being told, hey, you've got to check this out. And when you go there and use it for the first time, it just works, and something happens between your ears that makes that brand valuable to you instantly, because a service is delivered that is delightful.
However complex the math behind it, Google's hallmark is simplicity. Its homepage is as friendly and unthreatening as a box of crayons. And this is the person who keeps it that way. A 34-year-old human dynamo.
We're going this way. Sorry.
Named Marissa Meyer.
I want to see a much more robust brainstorm. I feel like we didn't really explore other ideas here.
She is tireless, hard-driving, and demanding.
I agree with his problem statement. I don't agree with the solution.
She's also been with the company from the very start.
What was it about Larry Page and Sergey Brin that prompted you to sign on with, at the time, this funky, little, unknown, small company named Google?
Well, I think there were two key factors in my decision. One is I think you should work with the smartest people you can find, and two, I think you should do things that you're not ready to do.
How did you know you weren't ready for it?
At the time when I was interviewing, it was just an 8-person startup. They were printing their own business cards. Them also coming in and saying, well, we think search could change the world. We think it could change every person's life, and we think everyone should be doing internet search every day. I really believed that, but at the same time, that was so far away. At Google, obviously, we're always trying to strive for new heights, trying to really reach for the stars. And so we have a fun demo, which is about the stars.
Meyer's official title is Vice President, Search Products and User Experience. But her chief role is Keeper of Google's Look.
We want to actually cause search to be something that's fun, that's an expression of creativity that people do every day.
She is relentless in making sure everything Google is simple, uncluttered, and above all, clean.
Why is that look so important?
Well, I think that it says to our users that we don't want to get in their way. I mean, we want an experience that's fast and clean and easy, where it's just obvious. Type what you want into the search box, and you'll get it.
In the late 90s, when other search engines like AOL, Yahoo, and Alta Vista crammed their websites with links and ads, Google's plain blank look was actually a problem for the students who first tested it.
They would go to google.com, load up the page, and it would be blank. And they would just wait. And 15 seconds later, you'd be like, what are they waiting for? Maybe they're thinking of searches. 30 seconds later, you'd be like, what's going on? 45 seconds, and you'd be like, okay, I really am going to have to ask, what are they waiting for? And the answer is the same all 16 times that day. We're waiting for the rest of it.
Today, nearly 2/3 of the internet searches done worldwide, almost 2 billion a day, are done on Google.
What's your favorite internet search engine?
Google. Google.
Google. Google. Google.
Google.
Google.
Google. Whether you're in Mongolia, Saudi Arabia, or Bangladesh, the word for search is
Google.
And that's despite some formidable competition. Rival Microsoft has launched a massive campaign to promote its new Bing search engine, which has slowly gained market share.
It's not just a search engine, it's the first ever decision engine from Microsoft.
Yahoo and Microsoft have also inked a deal to pool their search efforts, which could create a tough challenge to Google.
We're one click away from customers leaving us. We face very, very tough competition. I'm very, very proud of what Google has done. But never rest on your laurels. Always worry and always drive as hard as you can.
Google is no longer a startup, and Larry Page and Sergey Brin are no longer grad students living on fast food and credit cards. Today, they're worth $15 billion each, according to Forbes magazine. Brin, who immigrated from Russia at age 6, told us he never thought Google could be this successful.
No, certainly not. We've been, as a company, obviously more lucky than any company deserves to be. And we've been fortunate enough that when we're able to improve some aspect of people's lives, that we believe we'll be able to make a solid business out of that.
Solid indeed. And Marissa Meyer, who was the 20th employee hired at Google, hasn't done too badly herself.
This company has made you fabulously wealthy, hasn't it?
I think that, the success that we've experienced here at Google has been overall great.
It's pretty extraordinary.
It may be hard to believe all this stems from something as innocuous as a thing called Google. But underestimating any of the creative minds here has never been a good idea. Just ask Yahoo. In 1998, they had a chance to buy Google, but Yahoo turned it down.
People turn to the search engine box and admit things to it that they would not admit to their doctor, their shrink, their priest, their wife or husband, without a thought that all of these queries are being stored.
People are treating Google like their most trusted friend. Should they be?
Well, I think judgment matters. And if you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place.
That plain, simple address, google.com, has become our portal to the world. You can use it to find out how to tie a bow tie.
Tuck the middle of the loose end behind the bow.
Or to get a football score. It can also help you with more personal issues, like finding a divorce lawyer, researching a medical problem, even getting a date. And for all this, the world's most powerful technology company charges us nothing. But that doesn't mean it's free. The real cost may be in users' privacy.
I think most of them have not ever consciously thought of the privacy trade-off that they are making. I don't think they recognize that these products aren't really free, but that, in fact, you are trading your privacy for these services.
The decision to invoke the state's...
Kevin Bankston is a senior attorney at the Electronic Frontier Foundation in San Francisco. He's worried about how much Google knows about you.
Google keeps every search query, what you type into the box, forever. They have every query ever since You know, they started running this on a few boxes at Stanford. The question is whether that data is identifiable to you.
It's no secret that Google keeps its users' search terms. They say they analyze that data to refine their search engine and other programs. Marissa Meyer is a Google vice president.
If I'm a Google user, you have years worth of my search terms, stuff that may contain all kinds of incredibly personal data. If I use other Google services, you can see the contents of my email, my documents, my spreadsheets, my personal photos, my voicemail, even the contacts in my address book. You guys really know everything about me.
Well, we don't know everything about you, but I think the most important thing on all these products, on most of these products, in fact, all of these products, our philosophy is transparency, choice, and control. Be very transparent about what data you have associated with that particular user. Give the users very clear choices about whether or not to use the product at all. And then give them control over their data, because we really do believe that the users own their own data and they should be able to control it.
That may be Google's policy, but it's not the law. No one really owns the data, but Google controls it, and the volume of it is staggering.
This is the geo display. Each dot is a query, each color is a language.
Almost 2 billion Google searches are done every day.
And this is actually the live queries right now.
That has created an astoundingly intimate database of who we are and what we think.
People turn to the search engine box and admit things to it that they would not admit to their doctor, their shrink, their priest, their wife or husband, or anyone else, without a thought that all of these queries are being stored.
If that doesn't give you pause, Seton Hall law professor Frank Pasquale has a suggestion. Imagine someone reading through a list of every Google search you've ever done.
There are things that can be misinterpreted or that could somehow shed a bad light or shed a false light on somebody. You know, you may just be interested in a certain topic, but it may associate you with a topic like terrorism or something like that. If you're doing a school report on that, that would be tough if you ultimately found yourself on, say, some TSA watch list because it ended up getting to the TSA.
Yeah, but isn't a search done on Google completely anonymous?
It depends. If you're signed in, it's definitely not anonymous. If you're not signed in, that search will at least be connected to your IP address, which is the unique address of your computer on the network.
Privacy advocates say the digital footprints we leave behind, from cell phones, GPS devices, and search engines, just to start, have created a huge array of targets for prying eyes. Not just from marketers and hackers, but also the government and law enforcement officials pursuing terrorists and other criminals.
Police, don't move!
The Fourth Amendment protects citizens from unreasonable search and seizure. But the government has argued that it doesn't protect data handed over to a third party, like Google.
Can the government tell Google it wants, it demands all the information that Google has collected from any particular person who's done searches?
I believe that if you look at some of the examples of prosecutions and divorce actions there, that the answer would be yes. That because of something called the third-party doctrine, our Fourth Amendment law doesn't apply to a lot of things that you do online.
In fact, the Electronic Frontier Foundation estimates that Google is subpoenaed in lawsuits, criminal cases, and intelligence investigations tens of thousands of times a year. Though it sometimes fights these requests, Google is compelled to reveal its users' information in some cases. The company declined to tell us how often that happens.
People are treating Google like their most trusted friend. Should they be?
Well, I think judgment matters.
Eric Schmidt is Google's CEO.
If you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. But if you really need that kind of privacy, the reality is that search engines, including Google, do retain this information for some time. And it's important, for example, that we are all subject in the United States to the Patriot Act. It is possible that that information could be made available to the authorities.
The Patriot Act expanded one of the government's most powerful surveillance tools, the so-called National Security Letter. It allows law enforcement and intelligence agencies to see your internet activities without a judge's oversight. That's what worries Kevin Bankston, government access to Google's data.
Those in power have abused their surveillance authority as a matter of routine as you look through U.S. history. It's why we have the laws that we do.
But Eric Schmidt says protecting user privacy is Google's top priority.
Where does all my search info go?
Well, first place, we have our privacy policies are fully disclosed on our websites, and it's all written down very, very carefully. The most important thing we do is that after 18 months, the search information that you entered is so-called anonymized. It's literally gotten rid of, and we can't go back and track it back to you.
The data may seem anonymized, but if you combine it with enough other data, you can develop a pretty good profile of people, particularly, say, people in rural areas where there may not be that many internet users.
That's what happened in 2006, not with Google, but with AOL. In an attempt to aid scholars, AOL released a huge sample of anonymized search data, apparently without realizing it could be used to deduce the identities of users.
I had no idea. I couldn't find my own searches if I tried.
People like Candace Carpenter of Brooklyn. She had done AOL searches involving her legal work, her daughter's interests, and her family history. Much to her surprise, that supposedly anonymized data was enough to lead us straight to her.
I don't like the thought that my daughter's going to be evaluated based on searches I'm doing, but I can see that that could happen, and I certainly don't want people being able to find my daughter.
Google has not had a similar incident.
Right now, Google hasn't harmed anyone, doesn't really generate nightmares or tragedies, but who's to say what Google's going to be like in 5 or 10 years? Google's mission.
Siva Vaidyanathan is a professor of media studies and law at the University of Virginia.
We cannot rely on how much we trust this company. It's great that we trust them now. It's great that we use them now, but let's be careful about this because companies don't last.
The concern, experts say, is that Google or pieces of its database could someday be sold or spun off or end up in different hands, or that the company's priorities and policies could simply change over time. Worries over Google and privacy become even more troubling to critics, given that Google is big and only getting bigger.
There's no reason to think that in 5 years Google won't essentially be the equivalent of the web itself, because it's active in so many different areas of the web, including hosting web publishing and web video and so forth.
Google's size and its ever-expanding reach have even attracted the scrutiny of the U.S. Department of Justice. Google says it's unwarranted.
Do you see Google as the most powerful company in the world?
No, not at all.
You have a lot of information, though, about people.
But we don't use it, and we don't misuse it. We could misuse it, but if we did, we would quickly become much less powerful because everyone would flee to our competitors. So part of the answer to the criticism that's implied by your question and the direct ones by others is that if we broke our trust with our end users, they would leave, and then we wouldn't be very important anymore.
These mobile phones have eyes, they've got a camera, they've got ears, every one of them has a microphone, they've got skin, you can touch them, and they're increasingly augmenting our own senses.
The idea is you see something that interests you, you whip out your camera phone, take a picture of the object of interest, and this will trigger a Google search.
Congratulations. Here's your phone. Cool.
Don't look now, but that unassuming guy in the t-shirt handing out free Google cell phones
I'll give you your phone far less professionally than it would happen otherwise. But
is actually one of the wealthiest and most powerful business leaders in the world.
I'd like to introduce Sergey Brin, who's going to be joining us.
Hello. Why would Sergey Brin, one of the 2 billionaire co-founders of Google, bother showing up at some mobile phone conference? Because for Google, the stakes couldn't be higher. Mobile phone use is skyrocketing, more than 4 billion worldwide, with 1 billion sold in 2008 alone. Brin wants to make sure Android, Google's operating system for mobile phones, gets a big piece of that market.
if you can't look at the search results on your cell phone reasonably because the browser's not capable enough or the application sophistication is not good enough, then we can't really deliver you that information when you're using your phone. But Android has allowed us to bridge that gap.
The conference been good for you guys?
Yeah, it's been great.
Bryn has tapped this man, Vic Gundotra, to make sure that as the world goes mobile, Google goes with it.
Why is it so important for Google to have a major presence on cell phones?
We are seeing a very fundamental shift where increasingly, particularly among a young demographic and in Asian countries, the primary access to the internet is not through the PC, but through mobile devices.
Google first put its Android software in phones in 2008. Other manufacturers like Motorola, Samsung, and even Dell are now jumping on the Android bandwagon. But it'll still be a struggle for Google Android to challenge the 800-pound gorilla of mobile phones, Apple.
The new iPhone, 3G.
Apple's iPhone, with its vast market of software applications, or apps, has huge momentum in the world of so-called smartphones, which act more like handheld computers and web browsers than simple cell phones.
In some respects, we're past the era of the PC and into the era of extrasensory computing. These mobile phones have eyes, they've got a camera, they've got ears, every one of them has a microphone, they've got skin, you can touch them, and they're increasingly augmenting our own senses.
So far, there are roughly 10,000 apps available for Google Android.
It's called Pocket Auctions for eBay, and it's essentially a miniaturized version of eBay on your Android handset.
10,000 apps sounds pretty impressive until you consider that the Apple iPhone has more than 100,000.
Hi. What do you got there?
To beef up Google's offerings, Gundotra has to convince software developers and the makers of smartphones that the smart money is on Android.
What are you demoing here? We're doing Mafia Wars.
He works the crowd with the enthusiasm of an evangelist.
We're counting on folks like you to come up with these great ideas to move the web forward. So what do you guys have here?
Geodelic.
Google needs private developers like these, but it's also developing Android programs on its own, in-house. Hartmut Navin leads a Google team racing to launch an ambitious new technology. They're trying to tie the cameras in smartphones to the immense power of Google's search engine. Its official title is Google Goggles, but at the time, they were calling it Visual Search.
So imagine you're a tourist, you arrive at this place and you would like to know more about it. All you will have to do is you take a shot of the sign, and you see we recognize this as the Santa Monica Pier. Google Visual Search is a new technology that essentially allows you to trigger a search of an image. So the idea is you see something that interests you, you whip out your camera phone, take a picture of the object of interest, and this will trigger a Google search.
Google's competitors would be impressed if they knew about it. When we visited, the Visual Search product was still secret, but Google agreed to pull back the curtain and let CNBC cameras watch the process. It wasn't always pretty.
This usual page came up, but there was no links this time, and I didn't know what to do.
This sounds like a bug in barcode scanner.
So this definitely should be fixed.
Deadlines loom. Colleagues in other Google offices are scheduled to test it the very next day. 24 hours later, a group of Google engineers in New York who had never seen Google Visual Search finally give it a try.
You are at a friend's house and you see this cool book and you think, I want to find out what the reviews say about it. Do you think Google Visual Search can help you?
Back in California, they anxiously watch by video link as first-time users test the product. Some reviews are not encouraging.
Like, I think that Google Visual Search would help, but it wouldn't be my first thought.
No price, no product, useless. So you're feeling less certain that this will get you what you want?
If I had gone to my phone and done a search, I would have got better information.
Okay. Molly? Useful?
No.
Okay. Mike?
I'm going to disagree with everybody. I think this is way more useful than I thought it was going to be. It's not what I expected.
They decide it's just not ready for prime time.
Not yet.
So team members are dispatched to fix any remaining problems.
Come on. No, it didn't get the, yeah. We're still building out our database, so we don't quite have all of the objects in here that we would like to recognize.
The last critical hurdle is an internal product review called dog fooding.
Yeah, so I think that this is a good result, so I'm going to rate it heavily.
Shailesh Nalawadi is a product manager.
Dog fooding really comes from the phrase to eat your own dog food, which at Google means that every product that we get ready to release to our end users is tested extensively within Google by all of the employees at Google.
Never mind the cute name. Dog fooding means the team's baby will soon be in the hands of 20,000 critics, gleefully trying to tear it apart.
Googlers are very passionate about the products that we put out, and we get a ton of feedback, which we incorporate into the product before finally releasing it out to the hands of the end users.
Google is used to leading the field, but not in mobile phones. Visual search and apps like it are critical if Google is going to challenge Apple and claim more of those tiny screens in billions of hands around the globe. For now, Google is playing catch-up.
What AdWords does is it creates a level playing field for everyone from the smallest mom-and-pop business up to the largest Fortune 500 company.
How good of a program is Google AdWords for small businesses like yours?
In my opinion, it would be indispensable at a time like this.
AdWords is what made Google Google.
In the small, sun-baked town of Nogales, Arizona, just a stone's throw from the U.S.-Mexico border, we found an unlikely marriage of old-world craftsmanship and high-tech salesmanship.
The cowboys that wear our boots like to buy the toughest boot we can possibly make, so we delight in making the toughest cowboy boot that we can.
Cowboy boots don't get any tougher than this. And cowboy boot makers don't get any better than Paul Bond.
All right.
At 93, you can still find him every day in his workshop, sketching original designs.
Okay, that'll give him a little design around the top.
And hand-fitting the wooden forms he makes for each customer's feet.
We shape his toes down to it, and the arch is just the right length.
The result is some of the most exquisite, durable, and expensive cowboy boots available anywhere. From $500 and up, depending on the design and leather.
What's the best skin?
Oh, really, one of the best is just a good old heavyweight calfskin. There's a heavyweight calfskin right there.
For decades, Bond Boot relied mostly on word of mouth, including some very famous mouths. But recently, this old-school craftsman took a gigantic step forward and planted his hand-cut boot firmly in the 21st century. Bond Boot began to advertise on Google. George Bond is Paul's son and business partner.
Did you know much about Google before approaching?
Only as the search engine. I used it a lot. It actually was my favorite search engine. But nothing about AdWords, nothing about the advertising. I had no idea how it all worked.
Google's advertising program is called AdWords. It's a simple name, but its effect has been seismic, and not just for small advertisers like Paul Bond Boot. AdWords is one of the most revolutionary developments in the media world since television itself. Author John Battelle.
AdWords made the company. The company would be an interesting side note, as there have been so many in search. Dozens, if not scores or hundreds, of really interesting search services have come and gone, or still exist, but no one knows about them. But AdWords is what made Google Google.
So AdWords is the magic?
Absolutely.
AdWords may be the most successful and profitable business program you've never heard of. It generates more than 95% of Google's total profits, $4 billion in 2008. If you ever wondered how Google makes its money, AdWords is it.
It is very pure. It is a pure profit machine. I have a thesis, which is that they have more profits in that company than the entire media business. You know, in the 10 years that the company's been profitable or so. It's staggering.
AdWords is what generates the ads or sponsored links you see on a Google results page. If you Google custom or handmade cowboy boots,
there you are.
Yeah.
The Paul Bond Boot ad often shows up there. Those are called impressions, and they don't cost Bond Boot anything. They only have to pay Google when someone actually clicks on their link and goes to their website. It's called pay-per-click. How well does it work? When Bond Boot launched their campaign, orders instantly spiked, more than 20%. And they've only gone up since.
How good of a program is Google AdWords for small businesses like yours?
In my opinion, it would be indispensable at a time like this. You can hit the people who are actually looking for the product. And in a product such as this, that's a relatively small number of people, but they do know what they're looking for if you'll just help them get there.
Most advertisers want their ads to show up as high on the page as possible. Here's how they get there. Let's say Paul Bond Boot wants its ad to appear when someone does a search for ostrich boots. Maybe Bond Boot is willing to pay $1 for every click on their link. So that's what they bid on those keywords. But there's more to it than price. Google's algorithm also gives a quality score to each advertiser's website.
You can't buy your way to the top if your ad isn't relevant.
David Fisher is Google's vice president for global online sales.
An advertiser who chooses the right set of keywords and shows really relevant ads can actually appear right at the top and actually be paying less than some of the advertisers who appear below them because their ad is so relevant. Our system actually rewards that. There he is. He shows up in the top slot.
And that's what happens with Paul Bond Boot. They may have a modest ad budget, but Google often pushes them to the top because of the quality of their website.
What AdWords does is it creates a level playing field for everyone from the smallest mom-and-pop business up to the largest Fortune 500 company and lets them compete alongside each other.
Advertisers can also adjust their campaigns down to the pennies they spend, the minutes they advertise, and the zip codes where they show.
You actually are presented with a map and all kinds of ways of determining where you want to advertise. In the moment, I have it primarily set by country, because we're trying to control budget.
This is very addictive because it enables you to watch all of the activities of your customer.
You are exactly right.
It's a constant scorecard.
It becomes kind of a game that you're playing.
Like most AdWords users, George Bond manages the advertising himself, and it's obviously working. Maybe too well. Sometimes he literally has to shut it off.
Google could overwhelm us quickly.
How will Google overwhelm?
Given the indicated figures, it could double the number of orders coming in. There is far more out there available to us if we decide to extend the budget further. There's a lot more out there.
Right now, the Bonds have a 4-month waiting list for new custom boots.
Your boots will be there in about 3 days. How about that?
That looks good.
Paul Bond couldn't have imagined Google when he started making cowboy boots back in the early 30s. But not even this tiny shop in an Arizona border town is beyond the reach of the Internet's most powerful presence.
Respond for unknown emergency.
It helps us do our job faster by helping us retrieve information quicker. So if I want to see abandoned buildings, I click on an abandoned building layer, and then it becomes enabled on my map.
High noon, and the Washington, D.C. Fire Department is responding to a possible explosion. On board, they've got radios, first aid gear, and the latest firefighting tool, Google. That's right, Google.
It helps us do our job faster by helping us retrieve information quicker, and it also gives us a reference point on a map.
Deputy Chief Dimitrios Vlasopoulos isn't talking about Google's search engine, but a customized version of its mapping program, Google Earth.
So if I want to see abandoned buildings, I click on an abandoned building layer, and then it becomes enabled on my map.
It also shows the location of every fire hydrant, fire truck, and EMS unit in the city, all in real time.
The hydrant layer is telling us not only where the hydrants are, but whether they're in service or out of service. If they're out of service, we can't use them, so we're not even going to waste our time with it.
Google Earth is part of a software package the city of D.C. buys called Google Applications, apps for short. Unlike most office software, apps isn't installed on individual computers, but on Google servers, accessed through the internet. It's an idea called cloud computing.
Tell me what the concept of cloud computing is.
Cloud computing means you get your technology from the cloud, from somewhere else. Instead of having to install computers and software and manage it all yourself, you get it in the cloud.
Dave Gerard is president of Google Enterprise. His job is to sell customized Google apps like Gmail, Search, and Google Earth to businesses, schools, and governments.
In the old world, you pay a lot of money up front, and then you pay somebody else to install it, and then you pay somebody else to patch it when there's security problems or manage it, and then you go through another whole set of problems when it's time to upgrade to the new version. In this world, all that disappears.
D.C. officials say Google Apps has saved taxpayers more than $3 million in its first year alone. With a growing list of customers like Genentech and Motorola, Apps is turning a profit for Google, but a relatively small one. What may be keeping it from growing even bigger is the fear among some companies of entrusting their data to Google servers.
What if companies, institutions are hesitant to give sensitive information about intellectual property on the Google cloud?
There is an element of trust required that there's just no getting around. You know, companies have to trust somebody. They trust their accountants, they trust their lawyers, they trust the phone company to transmit their phone calls. And at some point, they will become more and more comfortable with companies holding their data in their servers.
10 years ago, most of us had barely heard of Google, much less considered entrusting it with our most valuable information. Today, it is growing in size and ambition as this once unknown startup keeps moving into so many aspects of our lives.
Do a search for the phrase Google's future, and you'll get more than 1 million results. But none of them can answer the company's most pressing questions. Could it become too big for its own good? How much more can it improve its search engine? Can it continue to protect our privacy and its future? One thing's for sure, this is Google, and everyone will be watching. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Thanks for joining us.